We're here because free speech is under attack. We're here because people are being convinced that socialism works. We're here because people are being judged guilty until proven innocent. We are fighting back with facts. This is not a safe zone, so buckle up, Buttercup. This is the raw, naked truth.
Welcome to the Raw Naked Truth. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin. And with us today, we are going to be debuting our Wallet Watch segment, where financial professionals talk about what is affecting your wallet and what you can do about it. So let's go around. Our panel consists of John Rocco from John Rocco Asset Management, Bruce Anisi from Open Road Wealth Services, Brian Williams from Northshire Consulting, and Chris Calandra from Elliott Wealth Services and our sister podcast, Simply Financial. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thanks.
How's it going?
Great to be here.
All right, so the question we're posing today as we look at the year in review is, what is the biggest economic story that affected people for 2021? And Bruce, why don't we start with you?
All right. I'm not sure I went with the biggest economic story. I went with sort of a year in review theme. And I just felt that during the year, we had such mixed messaging from our governmental, medical, and media resources that led to an enormous amount of confusion and inconsistent actions about the pandemic, about economic decisions, about employment decisions, and finance, which in my world means investing. And I think that in the face of that confusion, we needed to have thoughtful, informed guidance as a really crucial part of what we were hearing from those resources. And instead, we got reactions, which are just not well thought out. They seemed rash and impulsive, as opposed to responses, which are measured, considered, and built on the idea that that there's a reasonable expectation of some type of a long-term outcome. So what I was focusing on was my client interactions, and to try to give them a clear, confident response to their investment topics, rather than the knee-jerk reactions of the day's news. So that was sort of my year in review.
Yeah, that is a very important issue. We haven't gotten straight answers. My favorite responses were those that the White House gave to inflation, because first they said it wasn't happening, then they said it was transitory, then they tried to blame the Trump administration for it, and then they went, well, yes, we have inflation. We have not gotten clear messages from our leaders. So, Chris, do you care to comment on that?
Yeah, my thought is similar to Bruce's. I think the pandemic is still the dominant economic story as it was in 2020. It transcends economics. It really affects us in a multitude of ways. What's happening with our politicians in Washington, D.C., as well as at the state level. It is really the underlying source of inflation, which is a very topical headline issue that's worth discussing. But I think the pandemic, Eric, it seems to me that we went into 2021 with a lot of optimism. We had 3 vaccines that were approved. We've gotten 202 million people vaccinated in this country. In Connecticut, as an example, I think the vaccination rate is 74%. So there was a lot of optimism that we'd be able to put the pandemic in the rearview mirror. But that optimism gave way to Delta, gave way to now Omicron. Hopefully I pronounced that right. And so in regards to that mixed messaging, it's created a lot of problems in the economy. granted, the economy is growing at a very good clip, and we are probably in the early stages of a new bull market that started last year and a new phase of economic growth. But we have supply chain issues. We have a labor force that's very dislocated. We have a tremendous increase in money supply. Some of these things are the reasons why we're getting inflation. We've had more deaths, Eric, this year from COVID than we did last year. We had about 385,000 deaths in 2020. We're up over 450,000 deaths in the US this year. I didn't expect that. I really didn't expect that. I didn't think the pandemic would necessarily go away, but the impact it's having throughout the 12 months of 2021, I think is surprising. And then I'll just add that this affects the economy with the mandates, with vaccine passports. You see Philadelphia, New York, California are reimposing various lockdown security kind of measures. We have the federal mandate that's being battled out in the courts. We have work from home. We're moving faster to a cashless society. We have all these breakthrough cases, battles over masks. We have migration with people moving from the Northeast to Texas and Florida, as an example. There's just so much going on economically, and the source of so much change and disruption is the pandemic. So that's my thought for the year.
Yeah, the pandemic has been a major economic story. And in fact, Joe Biden campaigned saying he was going to get COVID under control, and yet he hasn't. Brian, what do you think about this?
Well, it was funny when Chris mentioned COVID. It's almost like you didn't forget about it, but you're almost sort of, it's such a way of life at this point. I mean, and obviously inflation, that's what I had written down is my top story, because it affects real people and it affects them every day. Gas pump, grocery store. I mean, you see it. So more so, I think, than, moves in the market or any of the long-term things like borrowing money from the government side. I think that inflation number, and even though it's been a big story, especially late in the year, I think it could potentially be an even bigger story next year. There's still going to be some supply chain issues, but I think most people's, at least their investments account, have more than kept up with inflation, and to some extent wages have. Even Social Security got a nice bump this year, not quite to the inflation number, but certainly the most in a few decades. But if the market does correct a little bit next year, if we don't get that same increase in wages, and that inflation number is just really going to hurt people more, and especially those who have been dipping into savings to make up that difference, that extra, $10 or so in gas every week, or in some cases $30-$40 a week at the grocery store. If they've had to dip into savings for that, those savings will run out. So to me, that's sort of the biggest story late in the year, and could potentially be in 2022 as well.
Yeah, all of the polls say inflation is top of mind for most voters. We've seen the fastest inflation rate hike in 40 years. And even though we did see wages go up, the last numbers that came out, inflation had gone up over 6% and wages went up just over 4%. So we're still talking about a real wage gap of 2%. John, what do you think about what's going on?
Yeah, I think I agree with what everybody here has said. Bruce brought out the confusion. That's obviously the biggest issue, and Chris listed everything off. So that really explains. I think he summed up a lot of issues that are causing all that confusion. I think the biggest problem is the way the government, and when I say the government, I mean the Federal Reserve and the federal government, addressed the issues of the day, meaning the pandemic, et cetera. The biggest issue of the way the pandemic has been addressed was to create money. The Federal Reserve Chair Powell said that he can print money to infinity. And this is a philosophy that we've never really undertaken to this level. We have had periods of time where we've created money, but this is just unprecedented. And the interest rates being as low as they've been, maybe for good reason, for sure, but this economic situation that we're in, this economic climate that we're in of extreme low interest rates, extremely high deficits, and a federal government who seems to feel that, by borrowing more money, they're not inhibited to borrow more money. They're continuing to borrow more and more money in order to solve the problems of the economy and of the world. And these are things that we've never done. We've always, in the Reagan years, yes, we borrowed money, and all throughout all the presidents we borrowed money. But the bottom line is the rate at which we're borrowing it and spending money the way we're trying to do that is the change in the dynamic of how the chief economists of the world and the politicians of the world are viewing our economy. It's just like, just keep borrowing money, and if you can't pay it back, we'll print it, and we're not worried. And I think that's the biggest change in the dynamic that we've seen this year.
Yeah, that's certainly been a big change. And of course, the Fed kept interest rates at historic lows for quite a long time. Now that we're getting hit with inflation, they're sort of stuck there without the usual tools to fix it. So I want to go around quickly. Before we end, one quick line. What would you like to see happen for the economy over the next 12 months? Bruce.
I'd love to see them come up with some type of a simplicity with a purpose approach. Keep it simple. People don't want long-winded explanations of things. Keep it simple. Where are we going? Help us get there.
All right, Chris.
I would like to see inflation get wrestled under better control. I think that could happen if we could get the supply chain strain eased up a bit. That could be helped by good policy from our politicians. And I would combine that with the Federal Reserve tapering and begin to ease off on the amount of liquidity that's pumped into the system, so that we could begin to wrestle inflation under control. It's not going to happen overnight, but that would be a good down payment on it.
All right, Brian.
Yeah, I'd like to see a little more effort in the labor market to make sure that everything gets matched up. We got a lot of folks who are looking for work or underemployed, and then it seems like everybody's hiring. So it seems like we need a little more help there to get everything matched up. And the help could just mean the government doing less, not doing more. But we'd like to see that market match up a little bit better.
And John.
Yeah, I agree with all the above. I think you got to keep the whole secret is going to be to gradually increase inflation, but keep it under control and keep people working at the same time. It's a real big hat trick for the Fed to pull this off, and the federal government to try to pull this off. We're in a tough situation. I'd like to see them do it. They have to do it slowly and not react too quickly by trying to spike rates or whatever to shut down the economy. So yeah, I agree with all that.
Excellent. Some great insights from our panel. Thank you, gentlemen. And we will be back with the Wallet Watch each week. That's the Raw Naked Truth. You can catch each episode at xvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and wherever you find podcasts. We'll see you next time.